Okay, there we go. What the fuck? Can I get all the people that I had back in here back? Like that's fucking ridiculous, dude. YouTube, you fucking suck. What in the fuck is this? Hey everybody, please come back in. I have no idea what the fuck is going on here. YouTube is flat garbage. I guess this is the last time I ever tried to do this here. I did my best. It shut me down for copyright violations. I don't know. You see that stuff online, but I don't know. I guess if I mention the Tiger King, what the fuck? But it said that I violated somebody's copyright. I played my own song that I wrote and own the rights to indelibly. Um, so I have no idea. So that just cut out. We lost some people. I hope you guys all make it back. I'm gonna go back into talking about the Tiger King, and hopefully that doesn't kill the stream again. Maybe there's there are some people on the internet that don't like me. It's one guy in particular, and maybe they're bombing me or something. But I don't even think that's the case. I think YouTube's just fucking garbage. But let's get back into it. So my recommendations. I recommend Tiger King. It is a white trash masterpiece. It is literally unlike anything I have ever seen before in a documentary. It's literally just incredible. On the other side of things, the random horror recommendation for this live stream, I suppose, would be Suspiria, the 2018 remake by somebody with a completely unmemorable to me Italian name, but it's based on the I'm so sorry, Dario Argento film from back in 1979, I think it is, or maybe 1989. But it's really no, it would be 1979 because it's a German wall is still up, so it's from back in the day. Suspiria is extremely long. I might end up doing an actual the YouTube is absolutely back at it again. I might um I might be doing a much more bigger, like, the traditional where I actually look stuff up and then do the and then do the recording and all that for the HLC with Suspiria. But I think it's definitely something that you should check out if you get a second. It's an extremely bizarre movie. It's got a lot of good, weird, old movie things. So like, I don't even know really how to describe this, but sometimes when people are like inexperienced or just even just rushed directors, they'll just tell people to like act like witches, I guess is what I would say, especially in this. And so people just do stuff, and it's like you don't even know if it's really like it's definitely not in the script. No one wrote all of this out, but it's got a really good feel to it. And Suspiria, start to finish, has a really good horror feel. It's very creepy. It's very odd. And the few kills that you get to see in it are just fucking. I love them. I was actually, I would say, on top of my my original review for it on Twitter was that the intro is kind of rough, and it is. I'm not a huge fan of Chloe Grace Moretz. She's one of the few people I can remember in the movie. She's got an extremely small part, and it's not great. It's really weird. I don't speak German, but I took enough German that I can hear bad German, and it's jarring. And maybe it wasn't. Maybe she's actually speaking perfect fucking German. Maybe she's from Germany, but it didn't feel like that to me. It felt really odd and weird, and it's just not in a fun way. But Suspiria, man, you should absolutely go check out that movie. So those are the recommendations out of the way. For quarterly review, man, I wrote quarterly review multiple years ago. It is the story of a man who will do anything to get better at his job or get more recognition. And as he sort of goes harder and harder at becoming recognized by his boss, he finds that he's getting sick. And why he doesn't know why he's getting sick, he knows that he is, But even that won't stop him from going back to his desk day by day. I hope that everybody that's in the stream is in the stream and ready. Anybody that's arriving late or rewatching this later, I'm sorry, but we are hopping into the story. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, today's tale quarterly review. Oh shit! I can actually I have it right here. So let's see. This is the transition, the bridge music. I played that at an absolutely awkward angle. Fucked it up completely. Here we go. Screeching intercom static drew the masses of sleepy eyes from their computer screens to the welded steel observation deck suspended overhead. Director Yoshimoto stood at his usual perch amongst the gantries holding up the platform. They spread out around him like black spider lace, flying up into the darkness behind the sodium arc lights, where some tradesman or another had bolted them into place long before Junichiro Sato was born. Nobody who helped construct the Amagashi tenancy and mortgage building was alive anymore. In fact, people didn't build buildings very often anymore. There was simply no room, and not enough skilled laborers in the city to bring the project to completion. They'd have to meet the provisions to live in City 17 anyway, forcing more valuable citizens, people like Junichiro, for instance, to move down the chain to some slum like City 16 or 14, an intolerable inconvenience. Please, everybody, can you turn your attention to Director Yoshimoto? A voice said from the intercom speakers beyond the gantry. To Junichiro, the platform and its floating suspension looked like a great, stylized eye floating over them all. He said silent prayers to nameless gods that the eye was focused on him, that all his hard work would finally be noticed. Perhaps the other workers felt the same thing when they looked up to Director Yoshimoto at the end of every month. Junichiro didn't much care about what happened to the people on the other side of the crisp green cubicle walls around him. They were merely the people he walked into work alongside. People who dressed like him and spoke like him and got their hair cut in one of the 3 or 4 respectable ways. He liked his haircut best, though after a week or so it was indistinguishable from the other men in the office. There was a shifting of cloth and body that resonated through the labyrinthine workspace as everybody turned their heads to Director Yoshimoto. He raised one hand in greeting, his palm flat and facing forward, looking to Junichiro like a sort of froggy Buddha. The director was short and round-bodied, and age had made his face flat and jowly. A frog in the web of a spider. What fly could survive such a challenge? Junichiro thought unexpectedly. He cleared his throat, embarrassed by the sudden poeticism, a holdover from youthful auspices he'd long since left behind. An unprofitable thought, his father would say. He scolded himself. I am proud to announce that this quarter has shown numbers above and beyond the expectations of our shareholders, Yoshimoto said, frog lips curling up at the sides in a smile that also closed his eyes. He dipped his head forward in a slight bow. I am honored to have inspired such an incredibly talented workforce to strive for such great heights. On cue, the entire workforce in question stood and bowed deeply in return. Thank you, Director Yoshimoto, they said in unison. Junichiro couldn't feel his own words as he said them, swallowed as they were by the crowd. Though it was uncouth, he always tried to speak a little louder than the others. He wanted his voice to shine out amongst the rabble, but it never seemed to happen. Now, in light of this great accomplishment, I invite every one of you to applaud as I announce our 3 most dedicated employees for the last 3 months, Yoshimoto said. Junichiro held his breath as the names were read off the list. Kai Toshi, Brenda Higashikata. He crossed his fingers on both hands, crushing them in his fists and again whispering prayers up into the void. Anything, just let them notice me. Let them see how hard I work. Yoshi Usubada had won Employee of the Month during the last quarterly review. Just a few days later, he'd been invited upstairs and given a new title and a new office. He had become Mr. Usubada instead of just Yoshi or Usubada like the rest of them. He was somebody. He was real. Sakura Kuzo, Yoshimoto said, reading off the last name. He stuffed the note he'd been reading off of back into the pocket of his white button-up shirt, pushing aside a set of patterned brown suspenders to do so. Junichiro felt himself disconnect from his body and float up to the ceiling, disappearing into the darkness. He'd wanted to buy suspenders like that when he moved up to middle management. When you were middle management, when you were somebody. You left your suit jacket on the back of your chair and walked around in suspenders and shirt sleeves. When you were director, you rolled those sleeves up to your elbow. Junichiro clenched his teeth so hard he felt something give painfully in his jaw. He hissed and turned back to his monitor, raising a shaking hand to his mouth. He was horrified to see blood and a small chunk of molar fall into his palm. He looked around hurriedly, hoping nobody had seen, and grabbed his wastebasket off the floor. He folded the cracked tooth up in a piece of paper and shoved it in his pocket, then spit several mouthfuls of blood into the wastebasket. Director Yoshimoto quit his podium and the workday resumed. Junichiro forced himself to focus on his work despite the ache of the broken tooth. His head was swimming by the time the night bell rang, announcing sundown and the end of the generic workday. Normally, he'd stay despite the ringing bell, pushing himself to inflate his numbers and increase his chances of being noticed for the Employee of the Month award, but his mouth hurt too bad. The numbers and letters on his computer screen faded in and out of focus, and he found himself correcting as many mistaken entries as he made correct entries. Shit! He said under his breath. He thought of the employees. Sorry, I had to check. He thought of the employees who'd proven themselves today, who would tomorrow be asked up to lunch with the bosses, who by next week might be wearing their suspenders out in their new offices, being asked questions by underlings and making important decisions. Shit! He said under his breath. Shit! 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 Junichiro stood and made his way to the clock-out line, where some of the less dedicated employees were already sharing low conversations and laughing about whatever slackers laughed about. He tried not to make a show of how badly his jaw hurt him as he swiped his time card, but the merest twitch of his head was like pushing nails into his neck and eyes. Junichiro? A voice asked from his left. Junichiro turned to see Mike Romanovich waving him over to a group of coworkers. Junichiro looked longingly to the exit and then grudgingly walked to Mike. Being impolite would be poor form, and he didn't want it to circulate that he could be a bore. Hello, Romanovich, Junichiro said. He greeted the few others he recognized, including Sakura Kuzo, the bland-looking woman who'd won the last Employee of the Month slot for this quarter. Most of the others didn't even notice him, being too busy fawning over Sakura. She made a show of demurring from their compliments and giving slight nods of her head here and there. We're going to the Gilded Lily, Romanovich said to Junichiro. The way he stood, in front of the crowd around Sakura, his head framed by the limits of Junichiro's eyes, made Junichiro feel that Romanovich was saying, We're going to the Gilded Lily, but not you, Mr. Sato. You're not wanted or welcome, underachiever. Would you like to come? Romanovich asked. Junichiro blinked. He almost blurted a no, but the sudden movement of his jaw to say the word caused a jolt of pain, so sharp and bright it almost blinded him. Then he thought of Sakura Kuzo, and how he might hear her secrets for success while she drowned herself in alcohol on everybody else's tab. Maybe he'd even see her get too drunk and puke, or embarrass herself, or go home with somebody beneath her station. Sure, Junichiro muttered, quickly adding, Thank you for the invitation. The Gilded Lily was one of 1,000 gimmick bars that dotted the red light district of City 17. Armed police checked their identification as they passed from the financial district, where they worked, onto streets filled with color and people. The strobe of neon lights pouring shadows here and there over the cityscape in this area always made Junichiro feel somewhat sick, unbalanced. Romanovich led the way through the throng of drunken reprobates crowding the front of the bar, most of them dressed in the drab khaki uniform pants and blue button-ups of the civil service. Genichiro was disgusted to see actual homeless people panhandling in the alley between two buildings. He looked around to see if city officials would come and sweep them up, but nothing happened. His coworkers found seats in a booth close in the back. His coworkers found seats in a closed booth in the back, complete with a great circular table of golden hammered steel. Clever slots in the middle of the thing opened when they made their orders, lifting pitchers of beer and mixed drinks to where they could reach. Genichiro tried to shift closer to the center of the booth as they took their drinks, hoping to get closer to Sakura, but the others crowded her first. Instead, he was stuck behind Kato, a programmer or something of the sort, who leered at passing women with half-lidded eyes. "Look at this one," he muttered so Genichiro could hear him. "She's a whore. Really, look at those tits. Fake. Big and fake." Genichiro tried to scoot away from him and regretted how he'd trapped himself in the booth, half between Sakura and this demented pervert. The only good thing in his life right then seemed to be the cold flow of beer over his cracked tooth. "Big fake fucking titties," Kato muttered. "Fake just like this stupid bitch here. Fake fucking bitch." Kato turned to look at Sakura, and Genichiro followed his eyes. "You should watch what you're saying," he whispered harshly. "She's right there." Kato laughed and hiccuped. "Fuck you, Genichiro," he said. "You don't know shit. You're a tryhard, aren't you? I can tell. In fact," he burped, "I know." "You're a drunken idiot," Genichiro snapped, though something of what Kato had just said had crawled into his stomach and soured it. "Yeah," Kato said, "and you're a tryhard. I've seen the numbers." "Numbers?" Genichiro asked. "The numbers," Kato said. "Your numbers. Your productivity, how much work you get done, the stuff that goes up to the bosses. That's what I do. I collate the numbers." Genichiro blinked at him. He'd never thought there was somebody who actually did something like that. Worse, this sloppy, disgusting drunk did it. This piece of shit was responsible for reporting his hard work to management. Kato grinned at him. "You do all that work and you never know how you stack up against the others, right?" he said. "Well, she did, and that's how she won Employee of the Month." "What?" "I gave that fake bitch access to the numbers, so all she had to do was work a little bit harder than the next hardest worker. It's easy when you can see where you are, pace yourself, and outwork somebody who had no idea what their standing even is." "You're lying." "No," Kato said, smiling across the table at Sakura and raising his glass. She shot him a hateful look that lasted less than half a second, and Kato chuckled. Then he saw that Genichiro had seen the look too and laughed outright. "Told you." "Why?" "Because she said she'd fuck me, the fake bitch," Kato grumbled. "I wanted to play with those perky little titties, but then she fucking reneged on the deal. And what am I going to do? Hire some debt collector to bring in a fuck I'm owed? Rape her? I thought about it, but I'd just lose my job. So there she sits. Fucking bitch." Genichiro sat staring at Kato, the ugly little man. He was like a goblin, with a rounded plug of a nose, crooked teeth, and stringy, thinning hair. Kato laughed when he saw what Genichiro was thinking and shook his head. "I don't want to fuck you," Kato said. "So you're shit out of luck." He turned back to the women passing the booth, commenting on their fake titties and muttering to himself what he wanted to do with them. Genichiro looked at Sakura and thought he could see it. Really see it. The lie behind her success. She caught his eyes and he could see something else as well. Smug satisfaction. She was better than him, and both of them knew it. If she had gamed the system, all the more reason to celebrate. "Anything," Genichiro said under his breath, still looking at Sakura. She had turned her eyes away from him, if they had ever been on him at all. "What you want, what you got, I don't want," Kato said. "Simple as that." Genichiro watched another of the waitresses pass, Kato's gaze lingering on the woman so long that Genichiro could almost feel the clothes being burned off her body. He pulled his wallet out and looked at the tiny pink plastic key he'd stowed in there months ago. Another ill-fated trip with his colleagues, after the last round of the Employee of the Month awards had failed to go his way. He sighed. "Excuse me, everybody," he said to the table. People broke their gazes to look at him with audible reluctance. Sakura favored him with an indolent smile. He bowed his head. "I have to excuse myself early. I made an appointment with Kato that I nearly forgot about. My apologies for my rudeness." The others grumbled and waved forgiving hands at him, and he stood and dragged Kato out the front door, dropping a handful of rubles on the table as he left. Okay, our first pause. I will go over some stuff and say hi to everybody. M God Killer, hello. Silkowski, what the fuck? Oh yeah, that was from the shutdown. It was the most irritating thing ever. And to pause on pause. This is one of my all-time favorites of yours. The rhetoric of a lot of America's administration right now echoes the main character's sentiment regarding work. I really do feel it. I mean, it's something that was kind of foisted on me when I was a full-time worker. I kind of did feel that. I don't know if you ever get this, but when you're working sometimes and you've gone for too long and you haven't gotten a good break, you start feeling sick, like not like actually ill, but like something's kind of eating away at the heart of you. And I kind of wanted to just make that feeling a more physical experience in this story, which I think I kind of did. Keep going. Pause on pause says, "I've always had a question about the spreadsheet that Kato shares with Junichiro. Specifically, skipping down, what do you know? Specifically, do you know what the columns where Junichiro can seemingly make no progress represent?" I will put a pin in that and tell you later so that I don't spoil it for anyone else that might be coming by, and also because I'll have them on the page after that break. So towards the end of the story, I'll reveal all of that sort of stuff. And yes, I do know what they all mean. And once you see it, you're gonna be like, "Oh, fuck off! That's ridiculous." Do I have some water still? Yes, thank God. With that, we're going to continue the story as Kato and Junichiro. By the way, it's Junichiro with a J at the beginning. Not that you would ever be able to know that without seeing it. But as we're continuing, Junichiro and Kato are leaving the bar after the quarterly review and heading to somewhere else deeper in the red light district. Here we go. "The fuck are you taking me?" Kato asked, looking around them as the red light district's lights thinned and faded. The gimmick bars and karaoke bars and restaurants disappeared, replaced by foreboding steel doors with signs reading "private" or "by invitation only," written thickly stroked scarlet kanji. Hey, we're going a little too far, huh? Where do you think we're going, dumbass?" "Just a bit further." Junichiro. Lo siento. Junichiro said, "Oh shit, hey everybody, Yui's this is our episode artist is in the chat, so say hi to her." "Just a bit further," Junichiro said. "Shut up, or you'll fuck everything up." Kato made as though to keep speaking, but decided against it, out of curiosity more than obedience. A few minutes later, they stood before a simple bamboo door with a brass signboard on the doorframe. It read simply, "Kashimura Group." Junichiro rapped on the door. "Does that say?" Kato said, leading in to get a better look. He paled when he read the name in full, turning to walk away before Junichiro grabbed his shirt collar and dragged him back. "Stop being an idiot, or you'll embarrass us both," Junichiro said. The alcohol was beginning to wear off, and he could feel the aching tooth again. Kato tried to stammer out a protest, but the door opened before he could say anything. Two heavily tattooed men in suits stepped outside, followed by an old woman in an elaborately layered kimono. She held a thin-stemmed pipe between the fingers of her left hand, that same elbow buried in her waist for support, as though the pipe were the heaviest thing on earth. "What?" she asked, passing bored eyes over both men. Junichiro took the pink plastic key from his wallet and handed it to her with both hands fully extended in front of him, dipping into a bow. She chuffed and took the key, rolling it between her fingers, then looking over the men again. "It's old, but whatever." She turned and walked down an unfinished corporate hallway, waving the pipe lazily in the air behind her coal-black hair. Both gentlemen are welcome, she called back. Credit for one and both can drink. The tattooed men stepped aside and gestured down the hallway. Genichiro walked quickly, trying not to show how nervous he was and sneaking a hand up to rub at his sore jaw. Kato grabbed his shirt sleeve. What have you gotten us into? These guys are fucking connected, he hissed. Genichiro shrugged him off with an irritated flick of his elbow. You'll see, up ahead, he said. Maintain your composure. They came to a lacquered red door, roughly 10 feet high and inlaid with a gold filigree in the shape of eels and pears. The woman favored them with a half smile and pushed the door. The woman favored them with a half smile and pushed open the door. Genichiro heard Kato gasp. 24 of the most beautiful women lounged on a dais in the open doorway. Their eyes slipped toward Kato and Genichiro slowly, one after the other, like leaves falling from a tree until all of them were looking. Some gave sensuous looks, pouts, or even glared, but most simply smiled. And each smile was as different as the sea might seem from a foreign shore. Happy smiles, lustful smirks. Some women grinned like idiots, and others made their lips into warm, demure curves like mothers or children, happy to see their patriarch after a long absence. Some smiles were sinister, others haughty. But all of them fell on Genichiro and, more importantly, on Kato. Credit for one, drinks for both, the woman said to the lounging girls, her voice quick and matter-of-fact. If any of them had heard, they didn't give indication, but one by one they rose, until 6 of their number were leading Genichiro and Kato through a rippling red sexual hell, a maze of scarlet curtains and shadow. Shapes writhed on the wall in silhouette, making noises that caused both men's hearts to race. Eventually, they found their way to a small table, almost a mirror of the one they'd sat at with Sakura and her new, if temporary, entourage. A few pitchers of beer and liquor bottles were set at the table, along with a menu of what else might be ordered. Kato poured himself a glass, and the women poured in alongside him, giggling and playing with his tie and his hair. His face darkened with a blush. The credit is for one of them, Genichiro said plainly, trying to ignore the woman who'd found a seat in his lap. What? Kato said dreamily, turning to Genichiro. One of them, Genichiro said. For a night. That's what one credit means. The credit is mine, but I'll give it to you if you help me. Kato's eyes widened and he looked over the women. He seemed so much more a goblin than a lecherous and hideous thing, all but burrowing into the hills and valleys of beautiful flesh. One of the women slipped her hand beneath Kato's shirt and his back arched. A line of drool broke the levee of his lips and dripped from his chin. If I help you? If I help you, Kato said slowly, wiping. One of them. He swallowed and nodded. Yes, of course. No problem. Then pick, Genichiro said plainly. It took 5 minutes for Kato to finally decide on a woman, a foreign blonde with almond-shaped purple eyes. A genetic taint from being born in one of the exclusion zones, Genichiro knew, but nothing contagious. She smiled softly and led Kato away by the hand. The other girls turned and waved sensuously to Genichiro, all save one, a woman with dyed pink hair done up in curls. Her eyes were radiation green, but Genichiro could see they were just contacts. I won't be going with anybody tonight, Genichiro said to her. That's fine, she said with a tired smile. I have to stick around and hang out with you anyway. She shrugged. Part of the job, you know. I suppose, Genichiro replied, having a drink from the closest bottle to soothe the pain in his tooth. The girl's eyes widened. Wow, you're really going after that, huh? She asked. Her eyes narrowed and she leaned in closer to look at his face. Hurt yourself? Your jaw is swollen. Yes, he replied. Earlier today. Her hand came up and grabbed his face before he could protest. She scooted closer on the bench and began to gently massage the swollen part. It hurt terribly, then felt better. He heard himself sigh, then he realized her face was only inches from his own. close enough to kiss. His heart fluttered. She smiled. There, how was that? She asked, leaning back and smiling. Her thigh remained close to his, and he looked down to see a thick line of tanned skin showing between the top of the white lace stockings she was wearing and the bottom of her pink miniskirt. She touched his chin and brought his eyes back up to hers. Hey, don't get distracted now. Remember, you aren't going with anybody tonight. She smiled. Yes, he said, trying to move himself away from her and failing. Okay, I did say that. Junichiro would bet anything that women like this would throw themselves at him if they found out he was middle management at Amagashi Tenancy and Mortgage. Women liked money and power. So, tell me about yourself, she said. And he did. They talked for 2 hours, he about himself and she about him, though he never quite noticed that fact. What he did notice was the way she laid her hand on his arm and smiled when he told a joke, and the slight tilt of her head when she was interested in some fact that excited him. She asked for drinks, and he bought her a few, in addition to what was tabbed out on the key he'd brought along. Kato eventually stumbled back to the table, looking cleaner and even stronger than when they'd first arrived. He smiled and thanked the girl on Junichiro's arm for taking care of his friend. Junichiro's face burned. He only just then realized he had never asked the girl her name. Oh, tisk tisk, she said when he finally asked. You're so rude, Junichiro. She turned to Kato and twirled her finger in the air. Could you turn around for a second, sweetie? He smiled and obliged her. Then she turned and kissed Junichiro on the mouth. Her tongue traced along his lips and, when he gasped, flicked over the end of his tongue. He felt her press something into his hand, a blue plastic key. Come back and see me sometime, she said with a smile. You work so hard, you know. You deserve some time to yourself, and well, she giggled and pushed her hair back over her ear. I could help you spend that time. I'd like that. Sorry, he blurted as she stood up from the table, squeezing his hand one last time and winking at him. My name's Kara, she said, turning to leave. As she walked away into the flowing red curtains, her fingers slid up beneath the back end of her skirt and found the hemline of her panties, which she adjusted with a single smooth motion that revealed every curve and contour of her ass. Junichiro swallowed and looked at Kato, who was beaming back at him. Break time for just a second. I wouldn't mind talking about that scene for a second, just because that's all kind of based on real stuff. If you don't know, gangs like mafia gangs in Japan are, the Yakuza are actually framed as business groups. So they call themselves the Zaibatsus. So there'd be the Sakura Zaibatsu or the Amagashi Zaibatsu. And it just means group. But usually when you hear that, it's kind of like, oh, okay, so these guys are trying to play like they're connected. And I really like that scene, and I like that fact about it. Since I have been gone, everyone's just saying hi to Yui. She's the best. And that's great. I'm going to be back in a half a second. I'm going to grab some water because talking for more than, forever is it's slightly killing me. Just give me just a second. All right. And anybody that's out there in the chat right now, you guys, does everything sound good? You all hearing this accurately? Just let me know. Okay, and we're going to get back to it. Junichiro woke in a fugue the next morning, bothered by a scratchy feeling in the back of his throat. He hadn't smoked in years. The habit had gotten too expensive when the city adopted ordinances against it. But he felt like he'd smoked a pack the night before. His tooth no longer hurt, which he was grateful for, though he probably still needed to get it checked out. But that was a problem for another day. Now he had to get to work. Yes, the answer in the question, Yakuza do run brothels. Usually you don't want to try to run one without their okay. A series of maglev trains carried him to work from his apartment in a large, fairly modern residential block outside the financial district. He could do the entire trip without ever seeing sunlight, but always managed a few detours that led him up to the surface city. There he could walk through grass parks and crowded streets alongside the rest of the morning commuters, listening to other pedestrians yell at their phones and complain about the weather. A blinking blue light on his monitor at work told him he'd gotten a message from Kato, which he opened without warning. He almost expected it to be some sort of fuck you for trusting Kato to return on their bargain after being paid, but was surprised to find it contained a message with a single blue link. The hiragana over the jumbled English characters said only, "Click me." He did, and several windows flickered open on his desktop. They moved aside and others snapped open and closed as miles of coded green text slipped upward over black backgrounds. Then everything closed and his monitor went dark. A second later, he heard the chime of the computer restarting, and then he was looking at his home screen again. A window popped open, and he nearly jumped out of his skin, trying to cover it up with his hands. He looked around, but nobody had seen. It was a photo of a woman, the woman who'd taken Kato to the beds in the back of the club the night before, in fact. She was laying on her back, eyes half-lidded in ecstasy and breasts bare before the camera that had taken the picture. The words, "Thanks, brother," were imposed above the woman's navel in kanji. Junichiro cursed and then closed and deleted the file, shaking his head. He had half a mind to call Kato up and excoriate him over the incident when he saw the new program icon on his desktop. The text below it read, "Progress calculation," in kanji. He double-clicked it and a relatively simple spreadsheet opened up, displaying the names of his coworkers down a column to the left and a series of numbers in the columns to the right of it. Even as he watched, the numbers changed and the names in the left column jumped up and down, switching positions with every alteration in the score tally marked total at the far right. God damn, Junichiro whispered to himself. He found his own name just 6 places down from the top. It wasn't what he wanted to see, of course. He wanted to be in first place at all times, but it was hardly anything to be ashamed of. But even as he looked, one of the names beneath his own changed position and knocked him from 6th down to 8th. He blanched. Junichiro snapped open his workflow and began his daily task load, burning through his work straight through lunch. He worked until the numbers on the screen began to hurt his eyes and the hunger in his stomach made him feel dizzy. A fit of coughing built in his chest over several hours, deep, ugly coughs that rattled things loose in his lungs. He grabbed his wastebasket and spat a mouthful of clear mucus laced with black onto the paper he'd put in there yesterday. The sight of it disgusted him. The air in the red light district was badly polluted, and now he was going to spend the next week or so sick because of it. He slid the wastebasket out of sight and pulled his lunch, an instant ramen cup, out of his bag and ate. He cleared his workflow off the desktop to look at the progress calculation app Kato had sent him. Sure, he'd have at least regained 6th position by now, if not put himself up near the top of the leaderboard. His stomach fell when he saw the numbers. He'd fallen. Actually fucking fallen in the rankings. And all the way down to 12th place overall. Junichiro braced his hands against the side of his desk so he wouldn't pass out. He was all but drowning in stress-induced nausea at this point. The numbers in the columns between his name and the column marked total made little, if any, sense at all. Nothing he'd done that day corresponded perfectly with any one of them, though he could see a few columns where he lagged significantly behind the top 3. The notations over them, all in English characters, didn't mean anything to him, even though he spoke and read English fluently. They were nonsense abbreviations like APR and HEL and FUTPOT, which meant nothing to him. He thought about asking Kato, but decided against it. The odd little man disgusted him, and he didn't want to find himself owing Kato any favors. Or worse, giving the impression that he somehow valued the man's company. The thought of endless nights spent out with Kato as the man ogled women and drank his brain to pieces horrified Junichiro to no end. No, He would figure this out for himself. So, what do the columns mean? I can tell you that these are the three that he never gets. And if you guys have all pretty much read the story before, if you haven't, just ignore this for like 5 seconds. It's not a major spoiler because I never actually say what they are, but because it's a little special event, I'm going to tell you. APR means appearance. HEL is health, and FUTPOT means future potential. And as he gets sicker and more ungainly, these three things go down further. What he doesn't know is that those are the quarterly review. His numbers are constantly calculated, but those things are only calculated at the very end. So while they seem like they're not really moving, at the end it clicks over and then adjusts. I think it actually adjusts based monthly. So they just tent and completely tank his numbers as he destroys himself. And which, by the way, if you never worked in a management or tried to work up to management, people don't know this, those are things that are more valuable sometimes than your actual work outload, because, you know, somebody can be a hard worker, but if they're gross and they don't have a lot of growth potential, or their appearance is weird, or they're always sick and stuff, people don't want you to become the face of the company. They don't want you to be the face of their own decisions. And so what some people don't realize is that working yourself to the bone is never going to actually let you rise in companies, because the most basic things that you need to be a manager, you just don't have. So, you know, if you're working your ass off to get a promotion, but you're not the kind of person that could ever be in that promotional, in that area where you're going to get promoted to, it all might be a waste of time. So enjoy your life is really what I'm saying. To continue. He worked through the night bell until the close of the shop bell, He worked through the night bell until the close of shop bell, when most personnel were hurried off campus by the night patrolman. During the day, he had figured out how only two of the columns worked, those marked PRO and WRKHRS. The first was simply productivity, and measured every completed assignment. The second he translated to work hours, and measured every full hour of work he completed. They both rose faster than any other metric on the calculator. Nearly every other column seemed to remain static no matter what he did. Fortunately, they seemed to remain static for the other employees as well, which meant he simply had to outwork the other employees in a manner that accommodated for the difference in the other columns. By the end of the day, he was happy to see he dragged his score back up to a 6. Junichiro rode the subway home with his notepad open on his lap, tapping the screen with a stylus and moving figures around on a spreadsheet of his own design. This one was set up with Japanese writing in mind and flowed more sensibly from right to left and up and down, but it was still driving him insane trying to figure it out. By his calculations, Junichiro would have to work 16-hour days for the duration of the quarter, with carefully scheduled breaks and single-day weekends in order to break 1 point above the third-place position. But, he figured, nobody had ever won Employee of the Month award twice in a row, twice ever, really, so that's all he would have to do to win. And if he didn't win, he'd be a sure shot to get it on the next quarter. And then all the hard work would have been worth it, because he would have finally made it. He thought of Kara. He thought of Kara, her body slender and tanned and lithe with youth pouring him. He thought of Kara, her body slender and tanned and lithe with youth, pouring him beer and asking him how his day went. He'd make enough money in middle management that he'd maybe be able to coax her away from that line of work. He could pay her whatever she made there just to be his live-in maid, a beautiful woman who would wait on him and care about him and service his needs. Junichiro coughed and was dismayed to see more tarry phlegm darkening the sleeve of his shirt, turning it a smutty gray color. He really needed to get that looked at, though when he checked his schedule, he couldn't figure out when that might be. He woke the next day all but ready to tie a gung-ho headband on like he was studying for finals in college. He felt good despite the constant nagging scratch at the back of his throat and the mild throb that had returned to his broken tooth. He bought a package of surgical masks at the corner store on the way to work and affixed one to his face as a courtesy for others, just in case he was getting sick. Being sick wasn't a good excuse for missing work, even when you weren't trying to outshine the sort of high-end talent that worked for Amagashi tenancy and mortgage. So Junichiro dug in his heels and got to work. His cough worsened over that first day and the week that followed, so that he had to make a special trip into the retail specialty district downtown to purchase a larger box of face masks. The trip carved 2 hours off his single day. I am so sorry. The trip carved 2 hours from his single off day, leaving him only 6 to sleep and another 6 to himself. He felt like a zombie riding the maglev train. He saw other masks on the train, more than normal, and figured some new bug must be hitting the city. A fat man wearing the staple black and white suit of a downtown salaryman had a powder blue mask strapped tightly from ear to ear. Pale and sweat-stippled flesh ringed the hollowed eyes over the mask. A clutch of giggling schoolgirls wearing the uniforms of a prominent downtown high school stood nearby, clearly forcing themselves not to notice the sick man. He stumbled into them when the train decelerated at Kyoto Station 3. All four squeaked and stepped out of his way. The sick man grabbed a vertical handrail and swung wildly with the momentum of the train, barely keeping himself standing. One of the girls asked him if he was okay. "Yes," he replied, voice thick with phlegm. "Fine. I'm fine. Thank you." Junichiro saw a thick black lesion, like a scab from a terrible burn, capping the back of the man's hand like a tortoise shell. It had split from the strain of his near fall and leaked a thick yellow and black curd over his extended thumb and down the railing. Then the man was gone, lost in a flurry of bodies moving for the exit doors. Taking a break. When I do readings like this, oh my God, I've got to drink so much more often. But I'm trying to get there. I'm trying for there to be a good flow. Also, I don't know if I should be talking to the chat where you guys are talking to me, or to the microphone or the recorder where you can see me. Deep Cuts, happy you asked that question. Yeah, I think I'm gonna start doing these more often. I'm getting plenty of people in here, so I feel like you guys really like this. So I'll probably do these again with the other stories, in the canon, so to say. I can't do them every week because I would run out of stories before the end of the year, but I'll probably do something like this. I'm also probably going to start doing the Horror and Lit Club live if I can, because I can just edit the audio off of that. Also say life is almost impossible for him, yet he powers on with dreams never giving in. He goes hard for some reason. He really does try. A dream come true to talk to an author like you. Oh, thank you very much. And now we continue. When Junichiro's mind wandered in that second month, he thought of things he'd do if he weren't so work focused. Interests he might take up if he were granted the free time that came with being a few rungs higher on the ladder and a few thousand rubles more wealthy every paycheck. Sorry. The dreams came to him vividly as he plugged away at his computer, turning columns black and black columns green, turning red columns black and black columns green. He saw himself sitting like an ancient feudal lord in an elaborate red and black kimono, committing equally elaborate kanji to rice paper and rhyme. Around him spread a room of exquisite lacquered red wood and tatami flooring, the apartment of a king apparent, the corners laden with simple treasures and ornate women, all redolent and awaiting his attentions. More specifically, waiting for him to finish and recite the poem he'd been working on for so long. Junichiro looked up and gave the slightest nod to his attendants, who put their faces to the floor in reverence. He finished the last stroke on the paper and smiled over their prostrated backs at his doting wife, who kneeled beside their son, a strapping boy of just 8 years. He looked down to read the poem. But all he could see were strips of jagged black scrawls, some alien and unholy tongue that forced painful images into his head. He tried to read them, but found his tongue glued to the roof of his mouth. Junichiro raised his hands to his face and felt a surgical mask there, made of steel and stapled into the flesh of his gums. He searched the room for help from his attendants and saw only the shapes of their clothes and piles of thick, black slush, like fresh snow dirtied by the polluted air downtown. His wife had clawed out her eyes. The ruined organs lay in fleshy red tatters over her cheeks. Her face had gone slack and idiotic, jaw cracking open wildly side to side as she pulled strips of wet meat from their son with fish hook teeth. The boy screamed but couldn't pull himself free. Junichiro snapped awake in a fit of coughing, turning and grabbing his wastebasket just in time to hack globs of black snot into the bin liner. He felt fine for just a second before something thick and slimy caught in the back of his throat, making him retch and convulse painfully until it shot free and collected on the back of his teeth. The taste of it nearly made him puke. Charcoal and salt and the smell of a bad fart. He couldn't touch it with his tongue to free it from his mouth, so he kept his face over the wastebasket and pulled it out with his fingers. What he found looked like a chunk of underdone eel meat. It stank, too, like shit and factory smoke. He wrapped it in the surgical mask he'd been wearing and stuffed it into the bottom of the trash can where it might cause the least amount of stink. Then he stood and trotted to the bathroom with his face held low over his hand. Syrupy black liquid had come up with the thing, staining the cuff of his shirt sleeve like squid ink. It stank, too, as it puddled up in his hand. He barely managed to make it to the bathroom before he puked, filling one of the washroom sinks with half-digested instant ramen. Thin streamers of noxious black colored his vomit like soy sauce, which made him dry heave until a thin stream of yellow bile joined the gravy. Somebody moaned in the stall behind him, a medium-pitched voice that could have been either male or female. The stench of what he'd put in the sink was terrible. Junichiro that shook the aluminum stall. Junichiro turned in that direction and saw only closed doors. The light in the bathroom was too weak to break the shadows beneath them, where he might see the person's feet. It was bright enough, however, to show him his own grime-smeared face in the mirror. He looked like somebody had slapped him in the face with a handful of chocolate syrup. Another moan from the stall, this time accompanied by fevered, urgent whispering. Junichiro glanced in that direction before burying his face in the sink and cleaning himself with handfuls of steaming hot water. Somebody cursed in ecstasy, and the stall door slammed open so hard it startled Junichiro into smacking the top of his head on the faucet. He hissed and held the growing welt on the crown of his skull, turning to where the noise had come from. One of the 10 or so cobalt-blued stall doors swung slowly back and forth on its hinges, as though somebody had just been there. But the bathroom was empty. Empty but for the smell of something hot with sickness, fading even now. Junichiro felt queasy. Not as though he'd been sick. Not as though he'd be sick, but like he was about to faint. He turned to the mirror and saw his own haggard face. A black splotch the size of a small coin discolored the skin beside his lips. The briefest touch told him it wasn't something he could wash away. It was a permanent blemish, a part of him. And for some reason he remembered the woman in his daydream. The nightmare wife who devoured his screaming child had looked just like Kara. Pause. Whew. So that's the first real scary scene, I think, in the show, based on a real nightmare I had. Which is basically just literally what's in the thing. Somebody freaking out in the stall door and bang, 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 bang. In that time, deep cuts. Same here. This scene makes me, from pause on pause, this scene to me makes it clear that his dreams of poetry aren't a perfect escape or solution from the corruption that his goals and upbringing have sown in his mind. Absolutely not. If anything, I feel like Junichiro probably always had dreams like that. A lot of people who end up, especially people who I've known, that end up working extremely hard, while sort of believing that the work itself will be kind of, that like work is something that you get out of your way so that you can live. A lot of them end up having these very deep personal dreams inside them, to the point where a lot of them feel like they are, real super poets and extremely creative people. And if they were only just allowed to pursue their dreams, everyone would immediately understand that they are this incredible person. But it's not like that. I mean, I am literally pursuing my dreams of being a writer right now, and it's a fucking nightmare, man. It is its own work. And for Junichiro, that was probably a dream he had fairly often, just being in there and being the poet that he thought he maybe could be, and not just a poet, but this extraordinary primordial genius lord with attendants and stuff, all waiting on his next whispered word, which is, it's a dream. Dream the dreams you want to have. But as this work nightmare starts to flood in, he's not even safe there. And that clicking noise that you guys may be able to hear, my rabbits are in here chewing on cardboard, so I hope that's not ruining your experience. And now to continue. Junichiro worked 2 days without stopping to earn the time he needed off to make the doctor's appointment he'd scheduled. His cough had abated some, and his throat no longer itched when he woke up, but a deep fatigue had settled in his bones. But I found a spelling error on that. And there was an incessant itch in every muscle in his body that made him think of ants writhing beneath his skin. That feeling would come and go, and when it went, the coughing would return. The coughs were short and productive now, yielding hunks of stinking snot that Junichiro found almost impressive. He couldn't imagine how his lungs were functioning with that tar coating their walls, but he found he could still breathe normally for the most part. He grew short of breath after long walks, and he'd get dizzy fairly easily, but his work wasn't suffering. That's what mattered. In fact, he'd put himself squarely in 4th place in the rankings. Despite a drop in some of the numerical categories he didn't understand, his productivity and hours rankings were the highest in the company. He often got off in the middle of the night, and clocking out was simply a matter of walking up to the machine at your leisure. He was happy there weren't crowds of idiots begging him to waste his time on drinking and carousing in the red light district, or trying to get him to join inter-office sports clubs or sign up for contests. Good, hard work, and the rewards that came along with it. That's what he was interested in. Maybe when he ran this place, when the Employee of the Month award sat squarely in his hands and he was making decisions instead of living by them, he'd put an end to all that wastefulness. People had a purpose in life, and only so many productive hours to spend on it. It was disgraceful how readily they all seemed to be to just throw that time away, wheedle it on drinking and carousing and all sorts of fun that just boiled down to spending money on useless things. They needed structure, discipline, purpose, profitable thoughts. But first, he needed to win that Employee of the Month award. And to win, he'd need to be healthy. Junichiro knew he was desperately sick, and if whatever killed him, well, that was an irritation he'd have to live with. Or not, he supposed. But nobody would stand over his grave and say he didn't give his all before the end. If it came to that, nobody would say he wasted 1 second of his life. The doctor's office sat in a high-rise full of similar general practice offices near Tokyo Station in downtown City 17. Junichiro had visited the office only twice, both times to receive a physical as necessitated by his insurance policy. The walls were a stippled plastic material he figured would be both easy to wash, and echo less than a flat plastic wall. Still, the room felt like a chamber in some submarine or spaceship, hollow and clean and painted a stainless white that ran to yellow in bad lighting. Junichiro's doctor saw him after 1/2 hour in the waiting room, which Junichiro had accounted for in his schedule, and another 15 minutes sitting in the exam room, which left Junichiro squirming with impatience. The doctor was a squat, sturdy woman with shoulder-length black hair and a gauzy pink surgical mask. She apologized for the wait upon entering the room without looking at him. Junichiro accepted her apology as she flipped through a folder on the digital clipboard she'd brought into the room. Polyurethane paper shot through with projection chips populated his vital statistics onto a page for her to read. Junichiro soured when he saw his name misspelled with the wrong kanji. You are sick? You are sick? The doctor asked, still looking over the folder. You don't get sick often. Is it the cold or the flu, you think? I'm not sure, Junichiro said. I've had this cough. Bad cough, the doctor said, nodding. She put her stethoscope against his chest while still holding the folder at arm's length. Junichiro saw numbers change on the page. Then the doctor snapped the folder shut and left the room. She waved a hand as she walked out of sight. See the nurse at the front desk when you leave. Junichiro sat for a moment longer, half expecting her to come back and actually look him over, but she didn't. He stood awkwardly and made his way out into the hall as sterile and coldly white as the rest of the building. Blue and red lines along the floor read reception and emergency exit in a mix of English and katakana, the letters cut out so that they showed the lightly patterned floor tiles. Somebody slammed a fist or something else soft and heavy against an exam room door in the hall ahead of Junichiro. The doors were the only non-white things aside from the mirrored black surface of an information touchscreen that popped on and off according to motion in the hallway. The only closed door was the one the noise seemed to be coming from, tucked into the corner where the hallway turned back toward reception. Another bang echoed toward Junichiro, a single, heavy thud that he could feel putting pressure on the soft bits inside his ear. It made him feel sick. There were words, too, some sort of soft mumbling punctuated by the occasional raspy cough. A thin black plastic pennant hung in the hallway over the door, one of a set of 5 of other colors meant to alert staff to whatever was going on inside the rooms. He'd seen the nurse who'd escorted him through the hall flipping them back and forth before shutting the door on him. But what did black mean? Another slam at the door, and this one hard enough that Junichiro could feel pressure build at the back of his eyes from the noise of it. Something popped inside his ear and he felt a surge of relief as whatever it was depressurized and relaxed. Giddy endorphins flooded his body and he felt himself shuddering from a mild head high. The motion-sensing screen flickered on, bathing him in red and blue and red and blue and red and blue and red and blue. The image on the screen was a big-eyed plushy cat wearing a polka dot tutu and a doctor's jacket. It waved a star-shaped wand and a title card appeared, reading, "Stress develops long life problems. Relax and take it easy now." Another bang on the door at the end of the hall. Now he could hear the mumbled whisperings much more clearly, even make out a few words. "Going to be late." The voice was masculine and cracked with fatigue, maybe even madness. "2 warnings. Please, give me 1 and I'll resign right now." "You have to take care of yourself, Mr. Salaryman," the plushy cat in the tutu said on the screen. Her voice was the irritating falsetto all these cartoons seemed to revel in, a tone that scratched at Junichiro's brain. Right on the inside, like a thin little kitten nail was running the razor between the meat of his cerebrum and the inside of his skull. He could almost see it in real time, carving little slices of connective tissue off the bone that curled up and pushed dents into the gray matter. "Fucking tell you about it. Number 1 in sales, number 1 in the district." "Have you gone outside to exercise? We live in such a bright, beautiful world. Get out there today and take a deep breath. Relax." Junichiro steadied himself on the wall and watched as the little cat turned her wand into a paper fan and waved it over the face of a stylized salaryman. Another little plushy cat, only wearing a black and white suit and black-rimmed glasses. His face was purple, and his eyes were X's stitched in black. The person banging on the door was pulling hard at the handle now, jittering the door in its frame. "Cunts love this shit." "Oh dear, I think he's worked himself up a little too hard." "Fucking whip it out and show him." "Do your best part to keep yourself healthy." "Say I can afford it. Who the fuck do you think I am?" Junichiro watched the purple-faced salaryman plushie swell. The belly bloated and then the thing's neck and its face. The stitching on its eyes and mouth gave way, fluffy white cotton erupting from the newly torn holes. The female plushie dropped the fan and fell on her bottom, pushing herself away from the exploding face of the salaryman plushie as black gel oozed from its eyes and mouth. Tell those fucking cunts I'm the boss. Multicolored static spread out from the rotting cat plushie's face, a brilliant nothing of green and purple and white. Blocks and bars of black moved out of that space across the screen in jittering pseudo-geometric patterns. The female plushie screamed, but her voice was down-pitched and static-riddled, corrupted the same way the image on the screen was corrupted. Fucking cunts. She tried to climb up the side of the screen as the corrupted data ate the title card and the stylized pastel backdrop of a city street. The last Genitro saw of her, the little plushie was crying big cartoon tears, desperately trying to carve her way into the left side of the frame, using the wand she'd changed back from the paper fan. Then the screen had snapped off in a fit of blue static. Boom. Pause, because I have to drink after I do those voices. So that's my favorite scene. Whew. That's a read. I hope you guys don't think I'm creepy when I'm doing those. I'm gonna give myself a break and read some comments now. Julia No Name, you have millions of words, word art to come through. Authors write hundreds of books. Dude, I feel like I've been writing like a motherfucker recently. Anyone that doesn't know or doesn't follow like HLC or just me complaining all the time on the internet, I just finished season 5 of the West Side Fairy Tales, which is a long singular story, and it's 140,000 words, which, to put it in perspective, that's something like almost over a day, a flat day, 24 hours of raw story, maybe a little bit less by the time it's over. And that's going to be 2 episodes a month on the first and fourth week. So boom, like wait for that to come out. So yeah. And then like I stopped that and I think I might be writing another fucking novel length story right now. I don't know, but it's going to be a big one. Again, Julia, there is an urgency in this story between capitalism versus not dying right now. I mean, this is an urgency in this world between capitalism and not dying right now. But yeah, you are correct. Pause. Yeah, for real. The conflict is especially poignant today in America, right? Julia, yes, bless you all. Here in Australia, we are all locked in. Numbers going up. Pause. Eek. Yeah, good luck to you all down under. I'm stuck in New York right now. Been isolated for a while, but doesn't look like there's signs of slowing the spread soon. We're all with you. Yeah, guys, everybody out there, even people that are in the chat, man, I hope you're all doing good. The numbers are fucking crazy right now, and I don't believe any of them. I think they're all low. You know, the testing's not out there. I don't believe anything that China says about their numbers or their ability to contain the virus. Just because there's no reason to. They don't have real press, and the Chinese government just lies. So who knows what's going on there? Our own government is run by an insane people. I mean, most governments are run by insane people, but mine is they're doing some shit. We're about to get our $1,200 don't die paycheck to hold people out for a month. So, you know, if you're out there, please stay safe. Please stay well. I really can't, you know, all the jokes about and the shit talking about people like not doing good. It is like incumbent on us down on the ground to just do our best, man, because don't expect the government to come in and actually help you. And that's not me being a dick or anything. Just take care of yourself, really. And then I'll leave on that. Pause. LMAO this dialogue. I mean, right. Haha, it's so great to be free without beeps cutting into fine art. If I remember correctly, I feel like you mentioned this story later in the chronology of your universe. And pause. Yes, this is in a section of the era of the West Side Fairy Tales, which I consider the Indigo Nightmare era. There's current era, which is like kind of like where we live right now, 1900s, late 1800s, early 2000s. Then there's the era of the city, which degrades into the Indigo Nightmare. And all of that is this would be taking place several hundred years after right now. So this story The most recent story that I put out, Within is Without, if you guys are familiar with that, takes place shortly-ish, either shortly after or right around the exact same time that this is happening, because things have not reached City 17, where Genichiro is. Within is Without takes place in America, what we would consider the continent of North America. Really, you wouldn't even say America at that point anymore. And City 17 is not what you would. He is in Japan, quote unquote, but it's not Japan anymore. As you can tell, the money that's being used for transaction is actually rubles at this point, which is a dark moment. If you don't know much about geography, people forget, like different things. Russia is literally right over the top of Japan, and they've been fighting their own wars between each other for forever, which I've always thought was interesting. And so things didn't go well for Japan in this far flung future. Let's see, where are we? Is there any sort of timeline yet? I kind of sort of described it. I don't want to get too into it because there's a lot of things that are going to happen, especially deep timeline, right around City. I've put a lot of stuff in the City era. Not too much is in the Indigo Nightmare and the Fade Out and the Crack. What I'm writing right now takes place 200 to 3, actually more like 500 or 600 years after this. And it's crazy, man. And then when you get to stuff like Without Eulogy, that takes place 2,000 or 3,000 years after right now, maybe even more, which is fire because there's space. Eventually we get to space, which I can't wait for. One of the things that I just put off writing right now to start this other thing that kind of just popped to me. Every time I have a nightmare that's good enough to remember, I try to put it into a story. So right now I just recently had this nightmare about walking over this horde of migrating turtles in a forest. So I'm writing that. I hope you're interested. You'll get to read it in maybe 2 years, I guess. That's fucking insane to even think about. But yeah, the extended stuff. There's one thing I really want to write, which is just out there in space, man. The timeline, the West Side Fairy Tales timeline is literally fucking almost incomprehensibly huge. I know where everything is, so I don't have to worry about it. But one day I'll write it out when it's a little less spoilery to get everything down on page. But right now I like to leave it pretty much kind of untalked about so that you guys can sort of figure things out for yourself if you ever want to. Some heavy work. I look forward to the new one. Yeah, this is nowhere near over. Yeah, actually, I've actually sat Yui down. We got drunk and I explained to her kind of the extent of the events as far as you can explain it over like a half-hour drinking conversation. And she just was like, fuck, that's wild. Especially Chinese ones. F. Koeth. Yay, America. Thank you, God, Trump, for the stipend. People are going to be like, man, Trump saved the economy with that $1,200. And they're just going to be like, that wasn't socialism. Are you enjoying the gameplay? Don't forget to follow, like, and subscribe. Is my Streamlabs connected? My Streamlabs is connected to this? Hold on. Let's see if this works. Give me a second. Okay, I don't think it is. Not really. So jealous. Yeah, Yui gets to know. If you guys want to be really jealous of anybody, you should be jealous of Sam, because Sam's not only seen all of the much more of the timeline, but she's also read all of the novels. There's novels too. I've been writing alongside this, and she's read every episode ahead. So, Queen Sam. All right. With that, I'm gonna hop back into it. The receptionist only offered Genichiro one of two choices. He could pay 40,000 yen for a 2-day doctor's note, or 400,000 yen for a 2-week doctor's note. That's the common option, she said with a polite smile. Polite, but tinged with a disconcerting undertone of disgust. The way someone might look at an addict in the family who says he's going to get clean, but he needs to borrow some money to get a place first. Genichiro shook his head. I'm here because I need to go to work, he said. I'm sick. I want to get better. What did the doctor say about how sick I was? Sick enough for the 2-week note, the receptionist said with another faintly ugly smile, but not sick enough for the 1-month note. If you can afford the note, there are cheaper clinics on the lower level of the building. Sorry, I almost thought I hit pause on the stream. If you can't afford the note, there are cheaper clinics on the lower level of the building, but I'm afraid they're less reputable than us, and many employers have them blacklisted. What about my medicine? Do I get medicine? Do I need it? Junichiro asked. His head swam with fatigue. He'd been hallucinating the little anime plushies. He hadn't seen that stuff. He was just tired. Very, very tired. The nurse gave him a long look, and then a look of recognition dawned on her face. For that type of appointment, you'll have to pay a higher premium, sir, she said, grabbing a digital folder from the drawer. We didn't realize you were in the market for that sort of treatment. My sincerest apologies. Junichiro gave her a stupid look, not understanding and too tired to hide his confusion. The prices are similar, however, $50,000 for a 2-week prescription and $500,000 for a 1-month script. Our doctors can even prescribe medical grade heroin, a 6-month script for 1 million yen, and that includes fill costs and a discreet home delivery. Junichiro thanked her quietly and stumbled out into the lobby. You can read these a million times and still have typos. Stopped looking at the mirror for the last month leading up to the quarterly review. What he saw only made him nervous, irritated. Large black splotches covered the area around his mouth like coffee stains. If he looked too long at them, he could almost see them moving, flowing beneath the skin like ink dropped into a cup of water. His mouth tasted bad all the time now. He hadn't been able to brush his teeth in weeks because of how bad the toothpaste hurt his gums. Lesions had opened there that wept tears of black grease. It would occasionally soak through his surgical masks when he talked to people, or when one of the now violent coughing spells came over him. He would always find out much too late, after somebody asked him if he'd been chewing on a pen or if he knew he'd spilled coffee on himself, and so he'd taken to avoiding people entirely. Which wasn't difficult. He now snuck into work early and left late. Sometimes he didn't leave at all. Nobody reprimanded him for his extreme work ethic or sent security guards by to kick him out after hours. Nobody seemed to care how many extra hours he spent at his workstation. In fact, nobody seemed to notice at all. Just like nobody noticed him there on that last night before the quarterly review, in place until just after midnight, collating and correlating and finally hitting the save and quit button in the top right corner of the screen. Nobody saw the insane glee that lit up Junichiro's eyes when he opened Kato's program and saw his name at the very fucking top of the spreadsheet. The number 1 position. He'd done it. Junichiro took the quick train home and slept in his bed for 4 whole hours before returning to work the next day. He'd almost made himself late, scarfing down everything he could find in his tiny kitchen. An incredible, black hole type of hunger had gotten into him during his shower. There was this sweet, mushroomy smell he couldn't quite get out of his head, and every thought of it made his stomach rumble. Meat, he realized after downing his 10th and last cup of noodles. I want meat. He hadn't had good, honest protein in months, and it hadn't been a staple of his diet for perhaps a year before that. He had the money for it, just not the time to purchase and prepare it. The same sweet, rotten smell got to him on the subway. Packed in amongst the people, it was stronger there, so that he was almost dizzy with need. His eyes felt glazed, foggy with lack of focus as his nose tasted the air. That morning, the trains were packed with people so that he and every other passenger's body were crushed together in the maglev as it hurtled silently down the line. The swaying motion of a deep turn made Junichiro lose balance, and he fell against the body of a young woman standing between him and the bulkhead. She glanced quickly up at him, and then resumed that 1,000-yard commuter stare, looking politely at nothing. Her eyes were large and black and beautiful, her skin an almost opposite shade of white. She'd put on a deeply red lipstick that morning that complemented the peach blouse and charcoal pantsuit she wore. It's her, Junichiro realized. She's the smell. There was no evidence for this realization. It came upon him like a revelation and so dominated his thoughts that he allowed the next sweeping turn of the train to knock him into her again. He breathed in through his nose, taking in the smell of her. She'd shampooed her hair either that morning or the night before, and below that, she smelled of deodorant and perfume and hand lotion, and of the light sweat now soaking the hems of her bra from the heat of the crowd inside the train. "Excuse me," she whispered insistently, and he could feel her pushing against him. He'd lost himself in her scent and was now leaning bodily into her, squishing her against the plastic wall beside the train doors. He could hear people whispering about him nearby, but he couldn't push himself away. The smell of her was too good. "I'm sorry," he mumbled. "I'm not well. Can you help me stand back up?" "Please just get off of me," she whispered. Embarrassment and horror colored her voice, and he could feel a sharp pain in his stomach as she jammed an elbow into him. But it did her no good. He just kept leaning against her, drinking in every scent, thin or thick, that wafted off her body, even the mustardy tang of her fear. The train came to a stop and she struggled to get free of him, to get out the door and away from this caustic pervert who trapped her on the train. But he didn't move, and neither did she. He felt something warm and wet dribble over his chin and realized he was drooling. Then somebody grabbed him by the collar and he was being pushed face forward into one of the vertical handrails. It didn't hurt. It should have, but it didn't. The girl slipped away without a word, and he watched her go with wide-eyed desire, horrific need naked in his eyes. People around him whispered words like pervert and freak as they pushed past him roughly to get off the train. He felt sharp things, keys and pens and elbows and fingertips, digging into him purposefully, maliciously as they passed, a polite reminder of how to behave on a train. Then it was over, and he was almost completely alone in the car. The dozen or so people remaining hadn't been close enough in the crush of bodies to see how he'd mistreated the girl, or didn't care enough to acknowledge him. They kept that same distant, vacant expression on their faces that held no interest in the world flickering by at 500 miles per hour outside. Faces that showed no knowledge that they too had seen what Junichiro had seen. His putrescent black drool smoldering crooked shapes into the shoulders of the girl's suit. His putrescent black drool smoldering crooked shapes into the shoulder of the girl's suit jacket. Light yellow smoke wicking up into the air as she fled to the relative safety of the subway platform. Taking another quick break. Is this the first I've spoken about the novels? Yes, actually. And also, no. I've been talking about them for a while. I'm trying to get published right now, so it's a gigantic pain in the ass. Diane Bell, I'll talk about in a second. Diane Bell, hi, I'm late. Hi, I'm in London. Hey, welcome to the West Side, Diane, all the way from foggy London town. I don't know if it's foggy there. I've just heard it is because that's the name of a type of trench coat. So, is he starting to crave human flesh at this point from M. Silkowski? Yes. He's craving meat, at least. I guess it's a spoiler to say what would be happening a little bit down the line, but we'll get there. Pause on pause. That's what I've always assumed. He is grabbing at life, the scent hunger. Interesting to think about it like that. Yeah, plausible metaphor. Ooh, look forward to the books, dude. If I got those out, man, that shit would be fire. If I had a few more thousand listeners, 10, 15,000 more, I'd probably just publish them on my own so I can get all the money myself. But I am still trying to get traditionally published. I got one person's out there. They're listening. They've got a full novel request. Some woman in New York City, an agent, and maybe she'll like it, and then she'll say, "Hey Tyler, yeah, yo fucko, let's get this bitch published and make you famous." I'll be like, "Aight, that's what I was looking for." We're hitting the deep chapters here. We're about to wind this up, so here we are, back to it. Director Yoshimoto held his hands to the sky to quiet the ostensibly silent employees of Amagashi Tenancy and Mortgage. Junichiro watched in a daze as he gave his usual speech. Profits were up, he said. Way, way up, and, wouldn't you believe it, costs were way, way down. Every employee in this great company had contributed to that success, but today they were there to congratulate just 3 who'd taken the flag and run further than anybody. The employees of the month. Sana Doshi, Yoshimoto said, announcing the first name. Junichiro looked out over the heads of the other employees, all visible now that they were standing above their cubicles. One day those lemming eyes would find Junichiro up there in the rafters, gazing down at all of them and seeing none of them. Thomas Winterbottom, Yoshimoto said, and more clapping followed. Junichiro searched the crowd for the unfamiliar name and found a distant shadow moving amongst other distant shadows. A man moving through the dark. A sound that could only be a circular saw cutting steel echoed through the room, and nobody turned to find it but Junichiro. Sorry, my fiance just wandered in. She scared the fuck out of me, dude. He'd club the guy over the head if he didn't. Damn. He'd club the guy over the head if he didn't hear his name called. And Hana Watanabe, Yoshimoto said. Junichiro looked around in horror. Mistakes had been made. He looked around for whoever had been running that fucking circular saw. It was their fault. They'd fucked all reality sideways. He remembered the spreadsheet on his computer and bent over to turn on the screen. Yoshimoto was talking about other stuff now, nothing important, nothing worth listening to now that he'd been robbed. Maybe he could print the sheets out and ask if there'd been a mistake. Maybe they could correct what had happened. When he saw the numbers, his knees buckled slightly and he swooned, nearly falling over his desk. Not only was he not in first place anymore, or even in the top 3, he wasn't even in the top 10. He had to scroll down to find himself 3 entire pages down in 24th position. 20 fucking 4. It took him several seconds of frantic reading to figure out what had happened. The numbers in the other categories, the ones with senseless markings he didn't understand, had all changed. He still led in productivity and hours worked, still outshone every living soul in the company, but the other numbers had utterly sank him down, dropped him clean to the bottom. Another set of rough calculations told him that he would have been clean at the bottom of the list if it weren't for his outstanding productivity ratings. Without those, he'd been beat out by the likes of Kato. Degenerate, drunk off his ass selling company secrets Kato. It was all too much. Too much. Junichiro shot to his feet in protest. He wanted to shout that there's been some terrible mistake at Director Yoshimoto, but all he managed was a great quaking cough. Every head in the room turned to him and he fell to his knees, half because of the shame of their pitying looks, half because he could no longer stand. Honestly, he could barely even breathe. Junichiro sucked in another shuddering breath and coughed into the trash can, ripping his mask away from his face and retching. Perhaps people could hear him, but he didn't care, couldn't care. It was all too much. He'd been robbed, and now all he could do was sit here coughing and retching into a trash can alone, the way he had all this month and the 2 before it. He breathed in again and smelled that sweet, heady stink of mushrooms and something else and coughed something wet and sloppy into his mouth. It tasted like the end of life itself. He spit the glob into the wastebasket and heard a sharp, metallic rattling sound. In the scant light leaking into his dark little cubicle, he could see a mass of black liquid in the bottom of the can, stuck to it like tar, and suspended in that, moving slowly in concert with the molasses spread of gunk he'd hawked out of his lungs, rolling up like primordial mosquitoes in amber, or 10 or 12 of his own blackened teeth. What followed came in a swirl of colorless light and dark, feels and sensations, fabric moving, and the human stink of shaking hands and close conversations. She won? Yes, and there are free drinks at Zack Snyder's downtown. Genichiro watched everything from a distance, feeling like a cloud of mosquitoes at the edge of a lake, a thing of no more form or substance than static, a cluster of primordial need, hunting for blood and sex and somewhere safe from the inevitable crush of death. Was he even here anymore? Maybe not. Maybe not. The invitation came and he took it, shuffling along at the back of the group much in the same way he had all those months ago, when he'd set his nose to the grindstone to unknowingly shave it clean off his face. He found somebody in the crowd he thought looked like Kato, and grabbed his shoulder roughly to turn him around. It wasn't Kato, and the man gave him a horrified, confused look before putting his eyes back to the ground and crossing the street away from the crowd of coworkers. His coworkers stopped at some gimmick bar and he kept walking, trying to think of what he could do to change the results. He was too sick to keep going the way he had, too sick almost to walk. Even now the world swam around him, a confusion of dark brick and harshly smeared neon rainbows, and the rolling orange thicket of clouds that seemed to always hang over the sky at night in the city, in City 17, in their district, in the whole world. Filth and water intermingled overhead to pour down something nobody could drink, that ate holes in walls and eyes if you looked up at the storm. The rain wanted to wash the whole city away, and the city persevered. An undying thing, a thing made by people who would never love their creation, who poured all their hate and derision and snobby genuflections to the poor and overworked into every gray slab of mortar between every cheap, moldering brick, a lich yard of the living, full of graves with nothing written on them, because there was nothing in this place worth remembering. There were no employees of the month, he knew. No nicer offices and nicer jobs and fair return for fair work. There was only this. Walking alone in a bitter rainstorm that washed the color out of you, that thinned you until you dripped away into the sewers, carried away to the ocean with all the other poisons to make the dolphins die. Something caught in his chest and he bent and pulled the mask away. What came up this time had to be critical to his life functions. A wet, angular thing the size of a sponge and so black with rot it melted in the gutter like a dirty snowball. He regained himself a second later and saw a familiar glow in the distance. He walked to it, eyes wide and with his hands forward in front of him, as though he might scare the neon sign away for having noticed it. Kashimura Group, it read in glowing red kanji. Genichiro found the blue plastic key he'd been given back at the end of last quarter, when he'd come here with Kato. He looked through the clear plastic at the door and found the red turned the plastic an almost headache-inducing shade of purple. Indigo, he knew. He went inside. Whew. All right. Last pause before the end. We're going to do a run here and run this out. So I'm going to drink my last little bit of water and read what you guys have said. Hey, there you go. Congratulations. Thank you. I think that's these are all comments about possibly getting published, but very, very distantly possibly. My friend produced an album via crowdfunding. We could do that. I consider all of those things as possibilities toward the end. I'd be happy to tell you. Hello, Sam and Sam Goodman, and obviously in Pause on Pause, who'd been here for almost the entire time. Thanks for the reading, Tyler. I've got to run, but I'll finish listening later. Good luck with everything. Hey, Pause, when you get back here, thank you so much for sticking with me this whole time. I really appreciate it. And here, oh my Lord, here we go. Oh, too far. The same woman in the elaborate red kimono brought him to a table in the back. He had to summon the nerve to tell her he wanted a room. They could save the table for somebody else. Kara wasn't amongst the group of girls at the entrance this time, though there was a woman who looked almost exactly like her. The same green hair, the same punky outfit, but all slightly different. All not quite there. He asked for Kara by name, and the same girl showed up, sliding her arm around his and resting her cheek against his shoulder as they walked. The woman in the red kimono seemed one with the flowing red curtains hanging over the room, making her way through it like a box jellyfish in a sea of red kelp. She seemed as much there as not. Only the occasional hint of white skin or the reflection of light off her perfect hair showed him the way to her. The woman, maybe it was Kara, asked him about work and he lied. He told her he was well respected in his field, though he wouldn't bother her with the exact details of what he did. He told her he'd been awarded a quarterly performance merit and that he was out tonight celebrating. She cooed and awed with everything he said, and on the few occasions when he looked down at her, her eyes were wide and open and honest. But he could feel the disconcerting lie beneath the skin of her. She would never care. Nobody would. No woman, for certain. They weren't for him. He wasn't for them. He could dangle 1,000,000 pounds of gold before her nose and she would say the same thing. In this world, Junichiro Sato meant nothing. He was a number amongst numbers, and that number wasn't so high. The room looked like he imagined a love hotel room should look. Cold and sterile on the outsides, but outfitted in soft, romantic pinks and blues and reds. Every surface was soft, somehow, except for the walls and the few exposed wooden or acrylic surfaces. The bed held a series of heart-shaped pillows in every color of the rainbow, set over a bedspread of heavily piled synthetic white fur. Kara took a seat on the bed, kicking off her shoes and giving Junichiro a look like no woman ever had. There had been women he hadn't had to pay for, but they fell in and out of his life as though he were broken, like a vending machine unable to retain the coins put into its slot, until one day the management left it out on the street corner for recycling. "Did you have sushi?" she asked again. Again? He'd been daydreaming. "I'm sorry," he asked. "What did you say?" "Sushi. I think you got some eel sauce on your mask." She pointed at his surgical mask and he raised a finger to it. The finger fell over something wet and almost burning hot. He turned away from her and pulled the mask off, looking at the stains she'd seen. It looked like the silhouette of a few coins resting atop each other, overlapping discs of smoking black waste. He put the mask back on slowly. "I'm sorry. I don't have another one," he said. That smell was in the air again, sweetness and mushrooms. The kind of sweetness that made your stomach ache. The kind of mushrooms that gave you visions. Perhaps it was the smell of hell. If he'd suddenly found himself there, he would be anything but surprised. "It's okay, silly," she said. He turned back to her and saw she was pointing a finger at him. "But you better keep it on if you think you're going to get me sick." She smiled, and he smiled back, though she couldn't see. Her smile dipped and her head with it, a practiced move that slid the cottony shoulder of her blouse down her arm. "Oh," she said. "Look at that." Junichiro stepped forward and slid the arms of the blouse down off her shoulders, nearly swooning at the feel of her skin under his fingers. She was the first woman he'd touched like this in years, the first human skin he'd touched in months. He should be ecstatic, he thought, but he wasn't. All that remained of what should have been there was a dull ache, a hole where that part of him should be. "I wanted to be a poet," he said flatly, looking at her body as she stood before him and turned, undressing in slow, loping movements that left her suddenly in her underwear, and then not even in that. She went over to the entertainment center past the foot of the bed and turned on the radio. Thumping, sexual beat came over the speakers and she writhed in time with it. "My father told me that was a foolish pastime," Junichiro continued, pulling off his jacket and then the shirt and tie. He undressed like a machine, pulling off unneeded layers and discarding them. Kara came to him and ran her fingers over his chest, either not noticing or purposefully not mentioning the broad black discolorations in his skin. The flesh over them was translucent and yellow, shiny like egg yolk. "You were a poet?" she asked. Her mouth found his throat and she bit gently at the skin there, working down over his collarbone and up the side of his neck. I wanted to be, Genichiro said. But my father told me they didn't need poets. The world got all its poets it ever wanted centuries ago, and didn't need any more. That's so sad, Kara said. But you're successful now, aren't you? She grabbed him inside his underwear, and he thought he might sigh from how good it felt. But it didn't feel good. It didn't feel at all. Yes, Genichiro said, his eyes dark and dull and fixed on something not in this world, but in the next. Or maybe even the world after that. I have accomplished everything I can in this life. It's a thing people know about me. You want to fuck me, Mr. Successful Businessman? Kara asked, her tongue flicking his earlobe. I've never fucked a successful businessman before. I bet you're so big. Her candidness made him sick all of a sudden. Chills rolled over his skin. I bet a big man like you might break me in half. He looked at her, and she didn't see that something deep inside him had gone. His eyes were the black beads at the end of a crab's eye stalk. She reached up and tugged at the string of his surgical mask. Kara screamed when it fell away, but nobody could hear over the music. The twisted hole that was left of Genichiro's mouth spewed something foul and black into her face, a reeking tar that burned when it hit her. One of his teeth slid down through the hissing slush where her cheek had been, a rolling white and black thing that could have been a dead fish floating on the night sea. She tried to push him away, but she couldn't breathe through what he'd spit on her. It closed off her nose and throat, and soon she was writhing in pre-asphyxia on the bed, with Junichiro up between her legs. His face was pressed against hers, his tongue long and thick and spotted like a cow's tongue in black and white and red. He slurped the melted flesh off her face, and the last thing she thought was how ugly he was making her. How ugly she'd be now. How nobody liked ugly girls. Nobody in the whole wide world wanted a fucking ugly. Genichiro sat on the bed with Kara's head in his lap, savoring each of her delicate white fingers as he degloved them with his warped mouth. Little flesh remained above her neck, but part of an ear in the dyed green hair. Her breasts, still whole but streaked with smoking grime and blood, lay sadly flat on her chest. Outside the door, the hotel operated as it always had, nothing new or different but the day and the customers, and those no more new or different themselves. But the door had changed some. It had been a simple wooden thing when they'd walked in, with brass fittings and a black plastic card reader set over the handle. Now there was a great steel door in its place, with nonsensical kanji that looked vaguely like ocean, and a dash followed by the number 45 in English. Genichiro, the boy who had wanted to become a poet, might have sensed something odd about this door. Might have been afraid of it, and rightfully so. Genichiro, the man, might have stressed over the possibilities, the futures, such an odd thing might lead to. But Genichiro, the thing he'd become, could do what no Genichiro before it had ever done. It could live in the moment. A smell came to it, a scent of sweetness and mushrooms, and it left the smoking, green-haired corpse on the bed to stand before the thing. Blackened flesh bubbled and split, weeping hot blood onto the sheets. The Genichiro thing could see something of its own face in the polished surface of the door. His head no longer kept the right shape. It was twisted and offset at the cheekbones. Wrong. Beneath its wet black eyes sat the overly broad black hole where his mouth had once been, where his new mouth now was. Again he smelled that scent of sweetness and mushrooms, and so the thing that had been Genichiro Sato stepped through the door, no longer seeking the fortunes of an uncertain future, and content to live in the moment. Boom. And the end. And as per every episode, I'll give the outro real quick. So that story was quarterly review. What did you think of it? Have you ever had a job that you worked too much and hated but couldn't quit? Have you ever turned into a black acid-spitting monster that murdered a prostitute and ate her face? Tell me all about it. West Side Fairy Tale Horror and Lit Club on Facebook. Hey, Filthy Midget. Thank you for stopping in. If you want to hear more of these stories, by the way, they are all on the. Oh, what you say? You really love this story? Awesome. Well, good. Anybody else that's out there that's just like listening to this? My name is Tyler Bell. I am the head of the West Side Fairy Tales podcast, horror and dark fiction podcast on everywhere. It's everywhere. I don't know. I confused myself by doing a different part of my outro. You can learn more at westsidefairytales.com. I do a new story the first Friday of every month, and we also have a thing called the West Side Fairy Tales Horror and Lit Club, where you can talk to other people about the show, about the episodes, and about the monthly recommendations that we make. Also, I'm on Patreon, patreon.com/westsidefairytales. Please hop over there and throw me a few bucks if you don't mind. I need the money. Everybody that's in chat, man. And I'll go back. This is going to be permanently online, so you guys can always just check it out. I'm sorry about the weird lighting issues. I should have put the things down so it's a little bit better, because this autocorrect is fucking everything up and turning me really dark. But it was probably a little bit atmospheric when my face is all the way down here. Spotify listener. Oh, awesome. I'm glad. I think I fixed the Spotify, by the way. It was really weird for a while. I transitioned out of a different podcast provider, and it caused like a million fucking problems. So I hope that all the Spotify episodes are working now. Let me know if they're not, and I will do more work to fix them. But yeah, man, did you guys enjoy the live read? Even if you're looking back at this after the fact, comment and stuff, and I'll read the comments, and maybe I'll end up doing more of these. We had pretty good numbers out here, and I really enjoyed it. There's some that I would never be able to do in a straight run. I don't know. Maybe I would do a charity run of Toto Americana start to finish or something like that if I ever got a little bit more famous. That'd be a meager 5 hours of fucking reading and talking to people. It's just a casual Sunday. But yeah, I hope you guys like this format. It's not a straight read, which I didn't want to do, because if you want to hear the stories straightforward, obviously they're on the podcast, on the real podcast. They're all edited. It's clean. It's just like it's like an audiobook. So it's perfect. Also, the audio is good. So it's fixed up. Everything works. My guitar playing is much better because it's a pre-recorded and not live. So it all flows. I cannot talk and play guitar at the same time. I'm not that good. What else? Smooth sailing so far. I'll let you know if anything was weird. Live read is great. Yes, more. Or live if you're canning this on reviews would be more awesome. Yeah, man, I should probably do that. Oh, yeah. Yui did this art for this episode at midnight in Milan, Italy, before flying back to America the next day. She got this, and then she lost it. Just found it again like last week. Oh my gosh, but man, that was great. I feel really good about this. I'm definitely going to do these again. This was so much fun. I probably won't do this in general with news stories. I might do this this summer, at least, with the premiere of the season 5 story, which is still technically untitled. The theme for it, Smoke and Ink, you can actually hear that on the YouTube. Just look that up, and it's pretty cool. I think it's on the YouTube. It might not be. It actually might just be in the West Side Fairy Tales Horror and Lit Club, which is why you should go there. West Side Fairy Tales Horror and Lit Club on Facebook, facebook.com/West Side Fairy Tales Horror and Lit Club. Sorry for all this like shameless plugging, but dude, like reading like this is so crazy. This is pretty much what it's like for me when I do the actual reads for the stories. It's almost always a long marathon session, with the exception of some of the multi-parters. Literally, like Toto Americana, you cannot read start to finish. The Move, that is just about to come out on Friday. By the way, our next episode is The Move, which comes out on Friday. Please subscribe and check that out when it comes out. Share it everywhere. I think Yui actually just sent me the artwork for it. I'm going to look at it on stream. How about that? I won't bring it up on the stream, but I will look at it while I'm on stream. And let's see. West Side Fairy Tales. Nope, I don't see it. Not quite yet. Oh, you must have done something in here. You must have moved something then. Oh, did you just drop the? I think she might have just dropped the quarterly review back in there. I digress. Man, you guys should check out that next story. And then maybe from now on, what I'll do is I'll put up a post on the Horror and Lit Club, a poll, and then I'll let you guys poll. I'll pick 4 stories that I don't mind doing, and then I'll pull them out. And then whichever one wins, then you guys can pick it, and I'll read that one next. And maybe if I... Michelle Wes, thanks, Tyler, for one of your favorite stories. Thank you very much. I can sing and play guitar. I cannot talk and play guitar. I did rereads as in radio production. Yeah, I have to. And that's pretty much what it sounds like when I record the originals. It's just usually, like I said, it's a straight shot read and a lot of rereading of lines. For this story, it's much easier because there's very little character voice work, which is always the hardest. Actually, next episode's a shitload of character voice work. So like, if I did that, it would be a much more difficult start to finish kind of thing to do. But I could definitely see these doing these once a month. This is really fun. What was I saying? Yeah, and then you just have to go. I go back through and I literally listen through it like 4 more times. Just the first time's the easy one. I get all this big cuts out. I take breaths. I have to look away. I have to reread stuff, which is a pain in the fucking ass. And then, you do like basic editing shit. So you go through and apply limiters and compression and EQ so that everything sounds really good and do your mixing, and I drop in the music and stuff. It's all fairly simple to me, at least, even though it honestly did take me 4 years to figure out how to edit audio. And I'm only just now really, really starting to get how to do it correctly. The biggest problem was that I was on GarageBand. If you're out there and you're a small podcaster, use the tools that you have. Obviously, you can't just go dropping money on stuff. I suggest, and this is, no one else will probably agree with me in the audio creation world, that you should invest in something like the $200 version of FL Studio that has actual real compression and EQ tools on it that are a lot more easy to use and more sensible. I don't really know how to describe this, but those, or like if you have more money, go for Logic Pro and stuff so that you can really kind of get into the editing and whatnot of it. It seems like you'd have access to all those tools in GarageBand, and there's probably somebody that'll pop in here and be like, no, GarageBand is the best. Whatever. I was on GarageBand for many, many years, and it kind of just fell out. I think Ableton is the best digital audio workstation that they have out there right now, from what I understand. Other people swear by Logic Pro. Other people swear by what the fuck is it? Audition. Some people go use Adobe Audition, which I don't mess with Adobe anymore unless I'm doing layouts and stuff. But yeah, I really, really hope that you guys enjoy this. Anyone listening back? Still more stuff. Plugs. This is the worst part. This is like the prostitute part of being an actor, voice reader, writer, whatever it is I am, is the marketing. I fucking hate it. I'm on Twitter at WS Fairy Tales. I am on Facebook, Westside Fairy Tales, Instagram, Westside Fairy Tales, and Patreon. Please. Yes, if you like the podcast and you have $1, I know it's fucking hard times out there right now. Other people are suspending their Patreon. I don't really think I can because I need that money. This is my main job. If you have to go and you want to come back, I'm not going to hold it against you. Just like go and come back. But if you like this content, patreon.com/WestsideTyler or /Westside Fairy Tales. For just $1, you get early access to stuff. $5, you get behind the story. If you like the way that I kind of broke down different parts of this story, I have whole episodes that are available only on the Patreon called Behind the Story episodes, where I do all of that breakdown stuff just as one long episode and kind of talk about the podcast and other things that are going on. So if you enjoy that, consider giving $5, and that'll also get you on the website. Thank you. I'll put you on our patrons part of the website. And if you give $10, you get raw release episodes. So like the move of people that are in the $10 category on the Patreon have had the move story. They've had access to that for something like 5 or 6 days now. It doesn't have music in it. It doesn't have the intro and the outro and stuff, but it's a pretty cool thing, I think, just to get to the story way ahead of the time. But I think on that, oh yeah, and then there's a $20 and you get merch too. You get a oh man, maybe I could. No, I'll show off the new merch a little bit later. But I will say right now, you will no longer, after the very next person that buys or signs up for the Patreon will get the last of the remaining West Side Fairy Tales bookmarks of the original bookmarks. We made new ones, and I will be debuting those soon. And they're just going to replace everything on the normal website, and they're going to be what you get when you get a merch pack. Also, in this week, I swear to God, I'm going to do it this week. We have a new type of merch that I'm going to be giving out for free. All you're going to have to do is basically do some Street Crew stuff for us, and we're going to send that to you free. I'm going to come out with more information on that in the next couple days. So just keep your mind out for that. But as far as the Patreon goes, the other two tiers are $20 and $50. At the $20 tier, you get a signed poster. I send a poster to you along with all the other merch packs and all the other stuff. And for $50, I will actually print out your favorite. I lay them out like a PDF with Yui's art on it, and I sign it and I send it to you. So if you want a signed copy of any story, $50 on the Patreon, that'll head right to you. I think it's a pretty good deal. Oh, also at $5, I forgot now because I'm doing this now. We send you the ebook for the story. So nobody knows how to spell these goofy ass names that I use, because obviously they're never in the they're never in the description. They're only ever in the story. So if you want to know how the names are spelled and stuff, join at the $5 level, and you get free access to the monthly PDF of the ebook, which is now in a Dropbox folder that you'll get access to. And so those Dropbox folder also has all of the other PDFs in it, so that you can look at those too. So every single one of them that we've released since the beginning of the show, even some that weren't part of the monthly episodes after we started offering that, but that people bought the signed version of the show. So there's even some accessible from seasons 2 and 3, 2 and 1. I don't know. Please check it out. And then I'm going to do my last run through the comments here, and then I'm going to roll. So it's mostly from Julia and Filthy Midget. Filthy Midget says Patreon is worth it. If you can join, totally worth it. Thank you very much, Filthy Midget. I don't know if I'm allowed to say your name, but whatever, I did. Julia, we actually have access to you. This is awesome, and that will be me. Bookmarks, come to Mummy. Yui, your art is great. I love watercolors. I do watercolor and love your art. $5 okay. In these times, lots of us don't know if we'll have money. Artists are suffering. Artists are getting fucked up right now, man. Artists are getting wrecked. I know people that are actually gigging musicians, and they're like, my life is over. But hopefully, it comes back. I feel like right around Easter and stuff, people are going to start getting back out there in the world, or at least by then something will be figured out. The one good thing I can say about America, and a lot of people in general, like a lot of people I've met in other countries in the world, I just know America personally because it is my country, is that we rarely wait around for the government to try to figure out stuff for us, or companies. You know what I mean? There's no greater evidence of that, I believe, than the way that our teachers react in this country to like austerity and cut wages and stuff. The American teachers, I mistreated all of mine when I was coming up, but they are seriously absolute fucking powerhouses. I'm lucky enough to be related to one. My little sister is a preschool teacher My fiance Sam's best friend is a middle grade mathematics teacher in West Virginia. And just the stuff that they do, and that they manage to get together on small amounts of money, on low end donations, and even out of pocket stuff is incredible. If you want to be really moved by stuff that people are actually doing in this, I mean, absolutely the first responders, absolutely the medical people. But have you seen the way that teachers in America, which we don't really take very good care of our teachers, have responded to putting together online courses for their kids, ensuring the kids have access to online courses, flipping the script on their entire course programs. It's been fucking incredible. And I think if teachers can do that, I'm pretty sure that we can all figure out something, and the thing is, don't wait around for the corporations. Don't wait around for the government to get it done. Get out in your community. Don't get out in your community, but figure out a way to get in contact with your community via Facebook, via Twitter, via stuff like this on YouTube, and just see what you guys can do for each other. As always, support the arts, man, because if they go, they don't come back for a while. It's hard. It's hard to get them back. And I think with that, I'm going to say goodbye. This has been a great 2 hours. It's actually like 2 hours and 15 minutes, except for fucking YouTube cut off the stream for no reason. They said I violated somebody's copyright. I was only playing my own music. I don't know who else has got that fucking song, but I'm going to fucking sue them if I find out that they're out there. And until next time, as always, stay safe out there. Thank you. Oh, now I got to end it.